is Sanusi Latif. This morning we're going to be having a fantastic conversation because my guest is a man of many parts, and I know he has so many to actually share with us in the course of the conversation. What we are going to be focusing on today is about football administration and of course the forthcoming NFF election. We're also going to be talking about football at the grassroots level. So my guest happens to be a veteran journalist. He's a former local government chairman in Edo State. He happens to be the former chairman of the Edo State Football Association, and of course at a point in time he was a member of the NFF Ad hoc Committee on Domestic League, and presently is one of the executive directors of the Edo State Sports Commission. I'm talking about no other person than Mr. Frank Ilaboya. If you like, you say Honorable Frank Ilaboya. Good morning to you, sir.
Thank you so much, my brother. It's nice having you on your show this morning.
Yes, same here. So let's get it started. I've mentioned so many things that you've done in the past and what you are doing presently. You've seen it all, from being a journalist to administering the game, and of course from even the general politics. You've done it, so you know everything around anything you want to discuss. That's my belief, and that is why I want to start this way. Particularly being a former local government chairman, you understand what the grassroots actually means. So how you describe the level of grassroots football development in Nigeria presently, and what you think we can do to make it better?
Well, thank you so much once again. Presently, I think we are not doing the best we can in terms of football development particularly. You also recall that grassroots is where all over the country, and I would have thought that more focus, should be paid to the grassroots. But unfortunately, most of this attention, are concentrated in the urban areas, which shouldn't be because if you look at the demography of Nigeria, not many people have the access. When I mean access now, to come to the urban areas, access in terms of opportunity, access in terms of accommodation, access in terms of transportation. So that is the more reason that we should do more of the talent drive at the grassroots. I think the NFF should have direction of this area, directing all the state FAs to ensure that the grassroots are actually considered when it comes to talent scouting and development. I also think that the academies we have are not also doing enough. You look at the number of academies that deal with grassroots, most of them again are concentrated on the urban areas. So what is happening? A whole lot of talent are cut off. I think it should be different. My experience as a local government chairman is what I'm just sharing with you now, because I didn't know when I was a local government chairman in North West, the activities we came up with, a lot of talents were discovered. Yes, not many people will do that. Not many of my colleagues would have done that because most of them are not sports inclined. I'm just fortunate to be sports inclined. And by the time we went on talent drive in Oman West, it was something that was massive. You could see the raw talent, waiting for. So I think NFF should come up with a policy in this direction, directing the state FAs to do more, and also the academies should also do more in this direction. Outside that, there's also the need to ensure that there is a database for. One of the biggest problems we have in this country when it comes to talent, multiplicity of ages, and it's not helping the system. It's not helping the system. So there should also be a policy that all this one should be captured in the database, so that this country should be able to look at the talent, look at their ages, and try to ensure that they graduate from that junior rank to the senior rank. So that is what I think we should be doing at this moment.
All right, thank you so much for that insight and the possible way forward. Let's while you were talking, you spoke about the football associations, you spoke about the NFF, And for someone that has been a football association chairman before, I think it's also be very important for us to drink from your word of experience in terms of why can't we have it better with our football associations. You see quite a number of them, they've been there for years, they've been there for ages, and you wonder what are they really administering in their states. And that is why some people also even called for the expanded Congress of the NFF. But we'll talk about the expanded Congress when we get to the NFF election. But my question is that why is it that sometimes you wonder what are these football association chairmen at some states doing to actually merit being there? What do you think is the challenge, and what do you think we can do to ensure that? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm also very concerned when I hit up to 15, 20 years, even 25. You know, when I was the FA Chairman of those states, went for the Congress, and I ran into 2-3 chairmen. So I have been here for the past 20 years. I have been here for the past 50 years. I was just succumbed, for God's sake. Why should it be so? You know, by the time you do 1 or 2 tenures, even if the third one, you should have been able to make the meaningful impact that you have in mind, and allow the system to run by people coming with fresh ideas. You know, again, that also tells me that the fact that there has to be a tenure limit or term limit for all the chairmen, including the NFF president. You know, so that let us have a time limit for people to come in and do their best and leave. It's not just even because of there's once I keep with the election, even when we are not performing. I suppose if I was trying to peg tenure for 3 tenure, that is a 12 years maximum, which I think to me it is nothing to do. You know, but if these things are not done at the national level, of course there's no way you can also implement it at the state level. You know, I'm not happy that some chairmen have made it a permanent residence for them, that you must be a FA chairman, whatever, even when there is no meaningful impact. It's not good for our system. It's not good for the young ones that are coming. It's not even good for the direction of football administration. But again, like I said, these are things that we should look at it from the national level, that we should detail in terms of policy, in terms of policy that will dictate to the state. That is the way to go, my brother.
Okay, still talking about that, we've spoken about those that should have actually leave the stage for fresh ideas to come in, and how this can be achieved, through the right laws that have been put in place and the right framework. But another question I want to ask is that we've seen that in this part of the world, there's some people that will get to that position, they really mean to do well, but sometimes the system frustrates them. And that is why some people tell you that it's easier to analyze and criticize from outside, but while you are there, it's something different. So how challenging was it for you as an FA chairman? How are you able to cope with some of these shenanigans of those that are used to the way we used to do it, or the way it's is being done?
Very, very beautiful question, because like Latin said, there are so many people who have good ideas, and once they get there, those ideas they cannot execute. For too many reasons. If you look at football administration in this country, 90% is tied to the government. 90% to the government. Even along the civil service line, which is very dangerous. That is why most people are saying, take football out. Football is enough to stand on its own. Football is enough to get money and run its own. But the moment you tie into government like it is presently, so it's difficult for you to create your idea. When I was the FA chairman here, I'm able to say for 4 years, I was vice chairman for 4 years, I was chairman for another 4 years. For those 4 years I was chairman, we never had a file in the government house. We never had a file. There was no single money come from the government. Because it is my belief that football is enough to generate this fund. And we are doing well. I remember one of the FA company we had under the administration of the former governor, Governor Bassetti. He was at the stadium, Ogo Stadium, and when he saw what we were doing, he then asked, I think, we want to run football separately. That day, the former president Ahmadu Pinnick and so many dignitaries were there because we wanted to do something different. I think that is the only way for you to be able. Because the moment you run with your file to the government, you cannot tell to say to the government when they put you on that they cannot do what they want to do. Not that the government per se. We are talking about people around government who want to, have their say or want to, have their faces in the football. But the only way to do that is to get football out of government. See, like most people are saying, the aim of government is to create the enabling environment. Once you create the environment, you have the security, you have the facilities, allow football to run. At the world, even at the club level, you and I know that once you allow government to run to dictate the show, of course, you will not be able to implement your ideas. That is the truth of the matter. That is why when those people get there, I also had that issue. I won't tell you, and I'm sure that issue will continue to dominate, until football is systematically taken away from the grip of government. See, government business is everybody's business. And when it comes to everybody's business, there is nobody that takes responsibility. That is the truth of the matter.
All right, let's talk about the league now. We've spoken about football at the grassroots level. We've spoken about administering football at the state level. But let's still talk about the league. Because as the FA Chairman in Edo State, you deal with the league. Any league match that is coming to the states, you have to be part of it. You have to supervise. And there is better insurance that was there. And that is still there anyway. Then besides that, like I mentioned, you are part of the ad hoc committee of NFF. You were appointed October 2022, if I'm right, and I guess I am, as a member of the ad hoc committee of the NFF on domestic league. So let's talk about our league. What is the major problem of our league from an insider's experience, and what can we do? It's not that people are bereft of ideas, we've spoken about that, but how can we get it right?
First point, the league as of today, I think we should have been doing much better than where we are today. Because any serious country, the league should be the forefront. But let me start from the upper level. Players play for the first clubs. None of them is considered good enough to play for the national team. That's what let me start from the top. So what that means is that you are discouraging even play in the league. Every single player that can good football, you see him running away from this country. They go to the Republic, they go to Malta, they go to Iran, they go to Iraq, they go to anywhere imaginable in this world. So if you have that type of people moving out every day, how will your league develop? So first and foremost, again, I also go back to NFF, the NPFL. They should make it a point that whoever is the coach of Nigeria at the highest level should ensure that at least 60% of our national team players are from the local league. If you did that, there will be more competition, there will be more commitment. Does it not even baffle you that out of the 20 premiership clubs we have in this country, no single player is good enough to play for national team? So if that is the case, what is the motivation of playing here? What is the motivation of playing here? That is one. Secondly, how much are these players earning? You and I know the cost of living in this country today. How much are they earning that will survive them, that will survive their family, and in long run? So there has to be more money in the system. How will more money come in the system? More money will come into the system if these clubs are run in a professional way, in the real professional way. All these professionals we are calling about now, this is a professional club. It is not. Because government still dominates. Government still provides the funds. Government provides everything. So what is professional about that? Go to Côte d'Ivoire here. I remember some of our players in those days, the late Keshi, the late Henry, all of them went to play Côte d'Ivoire, even Rashid Yakini. Because these clubs will be doing well, paying them well. Why can't we do that? Can't we do that in Nigeria? Pay our players well, have a real professional setup. Look at the number of clubs we have in the Premiership. How many that are privately owned? Most are maybe even Barao, maybe Barao. You know, so maybe it's possible that is coming on now, and so on and so forth. So how many of these clubs, Eimba, as big as Eimba, the only club to have won the CAF Champions League twice, back to back, is still tied to government? Is it River United? Is it Rangers? Is it even the Federation we are talking about? So that is the issue. So if all this, the league cannot grow. What makes league grow is competitiveness. That there's a future, that there's big money. Then of course you talk about sponsorship. What is its level of sponsorship in the NPFL today? Tell me one. So how will the league grow without all these parameters I've just mentioned?
Okay, we need to talk about the NFF election, but before we do that, there is one final question I want to ask about the league, because you mentioned something that like 60% of our local league players should be part of the national team setup. But some people will tell you that our best legs are actually in Europe. Do you think we really have the players that can hold their own if given that chance to be part of this fight in the league?
I disagree. See, if we encourage our players here, the level of going to Europe will also be reduced. And don't ask me a question. Does it make sense that out of the 20 Premiership clubs we have in Nigeria, if it's okay, let's just take one player from all these things. You have 20 players. Out of those 20 players, you encourage them, and they start playing for national team. Look at the South African team, for instance. At least 80% of them are home-based players. That is where you have your strong team. See, our players are not they are not the worst in this part of the world. It is lack of encouragement that is causing it. Let's not begin to encourage them. That is where the policy comes from. That the coach, please ensure that you stay here. Ensure that you stay in this country.
Maybe just like what Stephen Keshi did in 2013, that we had the likes of Ogtv Abeokuta and Sunday Mba. I said maybe like what Stephen Keshi did in 2013 that give us the likes of Sunday Mba and Ogtv Abeokuta.
South Africa, and look at how many home-based players that won in the AFCON for us. See, it is just a question of encouragement. These players are not the worst. They are not. Nigerian players are very skillful. That's why I started for the grassroots just now, that when you begin to hold their skill at the grassroots, monitor them in terms of ages so that they don't go and reduce their age unnecessarily, then you get the result. These are done through a systematic policy. That is where the NFF comes in. There should be a policy. For the past few years, 10 years, 15 years, what is the policy direction for Nigerian football? Even in terms of pattern of play, even in terms of coaching, even in terms, football is not just something that you just have to wake up and look. There must be a systemic, policy to go there. Look at Morocco, for instance. Morocco is doing well now in this particular because they invested in policy direction and follow it through. Even in our individual life, even in our business life, if you don't have that roadmap, you.
Okay, I hope it's still there. Okay, I can see that you are still there with us. Now, because of our time, we have about 5 minutes. We have about 5 minutes left on the program. Let's talk about the NFF election. The NFF election is months away, and we've seen. We also spoke about the right people being there, and the fact that you don't need to sit tight on that chair as maybe FA Chairman or NFF President. What's your take on the forthcoming NFF election? Sometimes people tell you that money plays a lot of parts, dirty politics and the like. So what do you think we should be having come? And the issue of the expanded Congress, people say that the NFF Congress should be expanded so that when we have an elected Congress, we have more stakeholders coming to elect our NFF president, not some of these chairmen that have been there for ages and for years, just coming out to pick who will run our football for us.
First of all, I support the agitation that there should be expanded Congress. See, what is fair, it's fair. Okay? If we continue the way it is now, it's not who will become the president. If we continue with this same system, it will be very difficult for the election to be competitive. It will be very difficult to get the very best The system we have now will not throw up the best in this country. And if our football must grow, we must get the best. I'm not saying, for instance, that the matter that is there is not the best, but I'm saying the system, the present system, of having a closed Congress. To me, this is a closed Congress. Open up the Congress. Include more stakeholders. You make it more robust. So that at the end of the day, there will be less noise, there will be less agitation, so that everybody will file in and ensure that the football growth is our concern. So I think that is what they should do. But if you look at the Congress in Yenagoa, Bayelsa State, I think last month, we will not be able to see the type of exposure we are looking at. So the agitation goes on. I was already the lack of Shagote Papi the other day, they said, they are going to court. See, these are real stakeholders of this country. There is no way you can shut them down or shut them out. These are people that have paid the price for this country, and effectively they are put there. Why not make it all inclusive, so that at the end of the day, you get the best person, you get the best support, you get everything that will pull up. Now we have made the World Cup twice. It's not bad. Even when FIFA has increased the slot for Africa to 10, Nigeria, the giant of Africa, is not going to the World Cup. So what could have been shaping more than that? Not because we don't have the talent, not because we don't have the wherewithal in terms of finance, because of policy direction by the administration. This is very sad. I feel pain. I feel pain as a country that parades the lives of Osime, a country that parades the life of Lukman in the world. These are the players that should have united the world, the USA, Canada, and Mexico. But today, the players will be watching from the sideline. Nigeria is very painful, my brother. And if you look at all this pain, that is why this agitation continues to grow. Now that from the election, one would have thought there is an opportunity to correct some of these anomalies. But the way things are going now, I think we are going to back to square one.
All right, it's like we should go on and on to have this conversation, but we just have to bring it home. We have to draw the curtains on today's edition of the program of Sports Executive. Thank you so much, Mr. Frank Ilaboya. Like I wrote out your CV, a special journalist, former local government chairman, former Edo State Football Association chairman, and currently one of the executive directors of the Edo State Sports Commission. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
My pleasure to be with you today. Thanks so much, brother.
Okay, the programs are returned next week at same time at same station with another interesting guest. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Olayemi Takuresan is in the studio. We'll be bringing you up to speed as regards the latest news on top of the hour at 12 p.m. My name is Sanusi Latif. Bye for now.